The cold water hit the woman without warning, dousing her from the top of her faded baseball cap down to her soaked sneakers. It streamed over her face, soaking the gray cotton of her t-shirt and splashed onto the dull tile floor of the Sterling Heights police station lobby, forming a spreading puddle. The lobby smelled of burnt coffee and aged documents barely masked by industrial disinfectant. She stood motionless in the center of the room, her spine rigid with shock and humiliation. Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. A single gasp caught in her throat, a gasp that was not fear but tightly leashed fury. Water continued to fall from her dark hair, soaking the shoulders of her shirt. "I told you to get lost," barked a voice from behind the reception counter. The shout echoed through the lobby, causing every eye to turn. The man behind the desk was Officer Dennis Kroll, a thick-set white man in his 40s with a bulbous nose and a red face. In his hand was an empty plastic water bottle. His sneer was full of contempt and self-satisfaction. "This is a police station, not a damn rec center. Go back to whatever ghetto you crawled out of." The few civilians in the room stared in stunned silence. A young officer filing papers in the corner froze mid-motion, clearly unsure of how to react. No one moved. No one intervened. The woman, still dripping, raised her head. Her eyes met Kroll's, not with fear but with ice-cold clarity. "My kind," she repeated, her voice cutting through the tension. "What exactly do you mean by that, officer?" A week earlier, her name had been announced in news briefings and council meetings. Dr. Brielle Monroe, newly appointed chief of police for the city of Sterling Heights. At 41, Brielle was known across the state for reforming departments riddled with corruption and distrust. She was a tall, commanding black woman with a law degree, street experience, and a record of decisive leadership. She had come to Sterling Heights after overseeing major reforms in a much larger city. The town, with its ethnic diversity and deep class divisions, was in desperate need of someone like her. Community trust was in tatters after years of misconduct by the local police, particularly in the city's western precincts. But Brielle had a rule. Change starts at the roots. She wanted to experience firsthand how officers treated the average person. So, she took to the streets in disguised faded jeans, old sneakers, a t-shirt with no logo, and a baseball cap pulled low. Her alias was Maya Daniels. On that humid Thursday, she walked into the Western Division precinct intending to ask about filing a harassment report. Her backstory was simple. A neighbor in her apartment complex had started making threats after noise complaints. It was a realistic scenario meant to test an officer's demeanor and protocol. The building itself spoke volumes, peeling paint, flickering lights, and outdated posters. Behind the thick reception glass sat Kroll, scrolling on his phone. She waited patiently. After a few minutes, she coughed softly. He ignored her. "Excuse me, officer," she said finally. He looked up slowly, his face registering disinterest and veiled disdain. "Yeah? I'm Maya Daniels. I need help with a temporary restraining order. A neighbor has been making threats." Kroll scoffed. "Go to the courthouse. We don't deal with petty squabbles." Brielle remained calm. "I understand that, but I was told I need a police report first." "Music too loud? Dog barks too much? That what this is?" He leaned back with a smirk. "We don't have time for your kind of nonsense. Go deal with it yourself." "Officer, I have a right to report this. May I have your badge number?" Something snapped. Kroll stood, rage coloring his face. "You want to file a complaint? That it? I know people like you always causing trouble." He stormed out from behind the counter, unscrewing the cap of his water bottle. In a flash, he poured the cold contents over her head. The lobby went silent. Brielle didn't flinch. She slowly removed her cap, revealing her full face. Her voice rang out with chilling authority. "Officer Dennis Kroll. Badge number 817. You have just assaulted a citizen. Refused service. Used discriminatory language. Do you call that police work?" Kroll blinked, confusion washing over his face. "Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Dr. Brielle Monroe. I am the chief of police for Sterling Heights. And you, Officer Kroll, have just performed your last shift unsupervised." Gasps rippled through the lobby. The young officer in the corner turned as pale as the walls. Kroll backed away, horror etched into every line of his face. "Chief, I didn't know. I swear, please." He dropped the empty bottle. It rolled to a stop at her feet. Please, I wasn't thinking my wife's sick. I have 2 kids. He began to ramble, dropping to his knees, pleading. Brielle didn't budge. You think it's acceptable to treat anyone this way, regardless of who they are? You think being chief excuses me from being treated with dignity? That's your mistake. I came here today to see how the public is treated. And you showed me. She turned to the young officer. Get the precinct supervisor. Now. Minutes later, Lieutenant Harold Owens entered. His face fell at the sight of the soaked police chief and the kneeling officer. Lieutenant Owens, she said calmly. Officer Kroll is suspended effective immediately. Relieve him of his badge, weapon, and radio. Confine him to a private room until Internal Affairs arrives. Owens complied without question. The investigation moved swiftly. Video footage, witness statements, and Kroll's own confession left no room for doubt. His personnel file revealed years of complaints that had gone unaddressed. Despite grounds for termination, Chief Monroe took a different path. Kroll received a 1-year suspension without pay and was enrolled in a strict rehabilitation program called Second Chance. The program included weekly therapy sessions, intensive training in bias, de-escalation, and ethics, 200 hours of supervised community service, mandatory quarterly evaluations. Failure at any point meant permanent dismissal. The move was controversial. Some praised her balance of accountability and opportunity. Others called it too lenient. Internally, officers were shaken. The days of ignored complaints were over. Brielle used the case to mandate new ethics training and transparent reporting. She continued surprise inspections and strengthened civilian oversight. Public trust, though fragile, began to return. And for Kroll, the road ahead was steep. He faced not just the shame of exposure but the grueling process of confronting his own beliefs. Whether he would change remained uncertain. But one thing was clear, the culture of the Sterling Heights Police Department was changing. And it started with a soaked shirt, a quiet stand, and the unwavering eyes of a woman who refused to be disrespected. Justice had arrived. Quietly. Powerfully. Permanently. The cold water hit the woman without warning, dousing her from the top of her faded baseball cap down to her soaked sneakers. It streamed over her face, soaking the gray cotton of her t-shirt, and splashed onto the dull tile floor of the Sterling Heights Police Station lobby, forming a spreading puddle. The lobby smelled of burnt coffee and aged documents barely masked by industrial disinfectant. She stood motionless in the center of the room, her spine rigid with shock and humiliation. Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. A single gasp caught in her throat, a gasp that was not fear but tightly leashed fury. Water continued to fall from her dark hair, soaking the shoulders of her shirt. "I told you to get lost," barked a voice from behind the reception counter. The shout echoed through the lobby, causing every eye to turn.